Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be making a hand puppet. Yesterday we made a little finger puppet, and I thought I'd keep the same theme. I drew out some cats, and my favorite one is this white one on the left. So we're going to start with a big white sheet of felt, and we're going to trace half of our hand. I highly recommend drawing out what you want to make first. Sketch out a few little sketches like I did, and test out some color combinations. Make sure it's not too busy because then it'll be much harder to translate onto this puppet. Once you've got half of it drawn, fold it in half, and then we're gonna cut it out, and then it'll be symmetrical on both sides. And then just double check and make sure that your hand still fits inside the lines, because obviously if it's too small, it's not gonna fit. So generally when something is more detailed and I have to cut it out, I usually just cut out general blocks and then I go back and cut out the details. It's much easier to cut out details when you have less work, less material flopping around, you know? Also, I'm sorry I didn't realize that I wasn't in frame for some of these parts. The camera is like up farther and there's still a margin of space before the edge of the desk, so occasionally I'll go out of frame for a second. That's my bad. So clean up your work a little bit. If there's some rough edges, make sure your hand fits, and then we're gonna move on to our details. For the pink parts of the ears, I just traced over the ears so that I had a general idea of how big they needed to be, and then I cut them down further a little bit at a time. And as I'm gluing, I make sure things are placed, and then I lift up a little bit and I glue towards the middle, and then I let that set and dry so that it doesn't shift, and then I'll glue down the corners and the edges. And then the eyes take up the majority of the face, so I went ahead and just traced the whole head and drew the eyes in, and again cut out blocks so that it's easier to cut out the details, which it's not really detailed, but it's much easier to cut like that as opposed to having the whole sheet. Also, if you're gonna have trouble remembering which side is the front of the, you know, your little shape, or the back, or up and down, go ahead and mark it. I added in the pupils so that I would know where to place the eyes. And now we're moving on to the little facial features, the little black facial features. So I'm cutting off some whiskers, and they were really hard to place, to be honest, I'm not gonna lie. And then I cut out a little triangle for the mouth and for the nose, and you can just keep trimming things until they fit perfectly. Now these little bits are tricky. You want to be very careful and very scarce with your glue. I glued on a little point, the point where everything is centered, or like the base point of the whiskers. That way they were placed exactly where I needed them to be. And then I went ahead and continued gluing outward, making sure that everything was straight and placed properly. It's really hard to avoid getting globs of glue everywhere, especially with a hot glue gun. It's very sensitive, and so this was a very, very slow process to make sure that nothing tore or melted or, you know, I don't want to say splashed, but like gushed over. It was the most involved part. And then I did eyebrows. In the drawing, they're just little dots, but I thought that it would be hilarious to have kind of a grumpy looking cat, but with like soft features, like the pink ears, and I drew on little black paw pads, but I ended up using the pink felt to make it a little bit softer. So it's like the grumpy cat that's like fluffy and you just want to love it, even though it hates everything. I thought that was a funny little theme to go along with. Making the giant bell for the collar was a little intimidating because you want to make a perfect circle, right? So what I did was I made a perfect right angle, or at least as close to it as possible, and then I folded it over, slanted, so that the edges were touching, and then I cut along that edge right there. So now I have, in theory, a perfect square, and then I folded it up a couple times so that I had to do minimal cutting So in theory, it would be nearly a perfect circle, right? It had a couple little points that I had to trim off, but it was much easier to cut this circle out than to, you know, try to freehand it. Everything about this project that could have gone wrong did not go wrong, which is not what I expected. I expected this to be a very difficult thing to do, and it ended up being very, very, you know, pleasing. I was just so like high stress about it the whole time, trying to make it perfect, and I really didn't need to. It was very straightforward and easy, you know, just don't be an idiot and sloppy and stuff, you know. But it ended up, it's not exactly like my drawing. Like, the drawing has taller ears, and I didn't really do that. But, you know, for the most part, it ended up looking pretty awesome. These little paw pads cutting out these circles, that was also tedious. That was probably my least favorite part. But they look so cute. Also, my camera ran out of space, but luckily I noticed it. I mean, I did glue on the back before noticing it. But, you know, just trace your character with your pencil or your pen and then cut that out, and then just carefully glue a little bit at a time, working, you know, going back and forth between each side. I started at the top and I worked the sides of the head, and then I did the tops of each arm and then the bottom of each arm. Just be very careful about it. That way, you know, the fabric doesn't sit weird. Also, it was kind of small and I couldn't fit my hand in it, so I just put a slit up the back. That's totally fine. Isn't it so cute? I was actually really happy with it. I was kind of sad that I didn't have enough white to do the back of it as well, but going with the, you know, the soft but grumpy theme, I thought that the pink back would fit just fine. I am actually very proud of this thing. I don't know how it turned out so well, but I am very pleased with it. I would be absolutely thrilled to see your work. Tag samlescreations on social media. I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you have a wonderful day, and happy crafting.